I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMar, and I'm here with my co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
And we are bringing you the show For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a program where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about it in terms of how it affects you, your family, your health, your wealth, your pocketbook, your happiness. And this is the best show in Ohio, we like to say, but it gets better every time you call at 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065. Anytime during this next hour here, and we will drop everything and we will take your call on any environmental topic, anything that you've seen in the news that you're kind of wondering about, any nice documentary on PBS that you saw that you wanted to mention, or any kind of environmental issue at all, just give us a call. And we're really hoping for some calls this week because, unfortunately, our hoped-for guests did not materialize. We were working this week to try to get a representative from TARDA on to talk about the benefits of public transportation, which, if you listen to the show, you know that we're big on public transportation.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, I was waiting for TARDA, and unfortunately TARDA didn't make it this time, and so we have to sort of wing it on this show. But we're definitely hoping to have TARDA on a future show, and they've assured me that TARDA will come on the show at some point, and so we will keep waiting patiently until TARDA actually arrives here on For a Green Future.
Hopefully soon.
Yeah, and they're, one reason I want to get them on is that they're having some ballot issues coming up. They're asking people for more money, and I want them to come on and justify it. And we support TARDA. I want to make that clear. Sometimes we complain about it, because some aspects aren't as good as they could be, but we want TARDA to be the best possible public transportation that it can be. That's why we care so much.
And a great deal of the reason why it can't improve itself is because improving oftentimes needs money. Sure, there's stuff that can be done, but basically, this is buses. They cost money. They need more of the little ones that go around for starters. And, the response of most of the suburban board has been to punish them for their, quote, inefficiency by cutting back their money, making sure that they can't improve.
Mm-hmm.
It's right. A little bit like when my dad tried organic gardening when we lived in Kentucky, and our landlord, Mr. Boyd, came out and was sitting there like actually stepping on the little seeds that Dad had just planted with his foot while saying, well, this won't work. No, it won't if you keep doing that.
Yeah. So
he was an old-time farmer, and he knew how to farm right,
right,
right in air quotes.
And we know that public transportation does work because it's working so well in so many places. No reason we here in Northwest Ohio can't have a world-class public transportation system. So we're hoping TARDA we hope to hook up with them very shortly or very soon in a future show. So that left us scrambling a little bit for what to talk about this week. And it is fall, sort of. I mean, we haven't had a frost yet, but
I think it went right from late summer to winter somehow.
well, not quite. It's still way above freezing.
Right.
And plants
it might go
are still
back
growing.
to, you never know what's going to happen anymore. Geez.
Well, it is supposed to get up to like 70 later in the week again. So.
Okie dokie. Is my big plans for the summer winter clothing swap out, and of course I'm terrified it will backfire on me because climate change.
Right. As soon as you put the summer clothes away, it'll go back up to 80.
Used to be you mostly could pick a good date and it would work out, you know?
Right. So I am going to talk about scary stories. I'm going to tell you some scary stories today because it's fall. We're getting close to Halloween, and it's time to maybe get a little bit scared, I think. But don't worry, we won't get too scary. We're just going to talk about the possible end of all life on Earth. So nothing too serious. Then, of course, we'll be hearing from
it's not a man with a hook scaring teenagers and making out in cars or something.
No,
yeah.
Not one of those.
We've heard that story, Joe.
Okay. Then we'll hear from our wonderful sponsors. Then we have an update on HB6, our letter from the future. And last week I wanted to start talking about the Mission Doe Reservoir, or Mission Doe Aquifer. We didn't really get into that. We ran out of time. So we'll talk about that a little bit this week. But as you could tell, we would very much like your calls at 866-240-1065. If you've heard something on a past show that kind of triggered something that kind of tugged at you and gave you some idea of, I really want to understand a little bit more about that, by all means, call in. This is about our 42nd show here, roughly, on For a Green Future. We've had some amazing guests over the course of this year, people who've been out with the buffalo in Montana, people from Washington, D.C., who are fighting the nuclear power industry, people from California. We've had people from literally all over North America talking about an incredible variety of topics, because that's the cool thing about ecology, is that it literally touches everything. Everything we do has an ecological aspect. Everything that feeds us, that keeps us going, depends on a healthy environment. And so we've had a really broad array of guests and people, and it's been wonderful. And so if any of those shows triggered something for you, let us know. Give us a call at 866-240-1065. Let us know if you've had a favorite show so far, if there's a topic you want us to delve back into. We'd be happy to hear from you. So, but now I have promised. Oh, and then, of course, those of you who are listening to this station, 106.5, The Ticket for Sports, don't worry. Once this hour is over, sports comes right back with Mick Gonzalez and the Cheap Seats. And all we're doing is taking out 1 hour out of the day to talk a little bit about this planet that's supporting us, this wonderful planet. So, scary stories. I want to talk about something that is pretty scary to a lot of environmentalists and ecologists. Others, not so much. Some people are pretty sanguine about it, but it's genetic engineering. And, we've all seen the science fiction show about genetically modified humans being able to do this or that, or, but the really scary part of genetic engineering is on the much smaller scale. The really scary genetic engineering is engineering of bacteria and fungus and microscopic biological organisms, because those things, those little tiny bacteria, are much more powerful than, let's say you had a genetically modified elephant that was 10 times bigger than the regular elephants and went on rampages in Central Park or something like that. Yeah, that's peanuts compared to genetically modifying bacteria, because doing that could literally destroy all life on the planet. And we're going to get into a little more detail about that. One of the things that people don't realize is just the extent to which bacteria pervade everything on Earth. I mean, there's bacteria literally in every square centimeter of the planet. Actually, all of us, each of us, have a cloud of bacteria that surrounds us and that we carry with us that are they start out on our bodies and they're sort of electrostatically charged, so they can sort of drift off into the air. And as you're walking along, it can settle on things.
So kind of like Linus in Peanut, or no, what was the one? Pigpen.
Pigpen, right? Exactly like Pigpen, right?
Yeah, we're all like that.
Yeah, everybody's like that. Even if you shower 4 times a day,
right.
You still have this cloud of bacteria. And there's bacteria at the highest points on the planet. They've actually discovered bacteria on the space station, on the outside of the International Space Station, that they believe drifted up from the ground.
Like some of them are anaerobic, as they say. They don't need air.
Right. They're anaerobic. The ones in the atmosphere are pretty much aerobic. The anaerobic ones are down in the layers of dirt and mud, like in river bottoms, or they're under logs or in swamps, places where there's not a lot of oxygen. So the bacteria in the air, though, can literally drift right up to the edge of the atmosphere and beyond. There's theories. A lot of scientists now believe that some bacteria literally just drift up into space and then actually get caught by the solar winds and blown out into space. Some have suggested that that's a way that maybe planets seed each other.
Wow.
Yeah, there's the idea of that life on Earth may have originated somewhere else, and it could have been bacteria that just got carried along in solar winds or brought in on a meteorite, that maybe Earth didn't actually spawn life, that maybe life started somewhere else. But it is interesting that you bring up anaerobic bacteria, because originally all life on Earth was anaerobic. There was about...
because there was no air. That makes sense.
Because there was no air, right. The atmosphere was this mix of methane and sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide, but no free oxygen.
So life made air, not the other way around.
Yeah, exactly. But we had this anaerobic world for half a billion years or so, where the Earth was teeming with life, but it was all bacteria. And some of those bacteria made colonies that made, you could still find those stromatolites, I think, and there's some of those still growing down in Australia. But the Earth there was no oxygen, and so the Earth was teeming with life, and there was no multicellular life. All the life was bacteria, single-celled organisms. And then a case of natural genetic engineering happened. And this is something that the genetic engineers love to say, is that, we don't do anything that nature doesn't already do. I mean, all we are doing is changing the genetic makeup of organisms, and nature does that on its own.
Yeah, but nature does it a lot slower to give everything time to adjust.
Exactly, yes. Nature gives everything a chance to everything in a community to react when something in the community changes a little bit. And so evolution can take place because, everybody's going like, this organism's producing these seeds now. I can eat those. And,
and if really big changes happen and they impact something like air or water or something that humans need to survive, then we might not be able to adjust to that change fast enough.
Right. Well, and this did happen naturally. A change happened that almost nothing on Earth was able to adapt to, and it killed off almost everything that lived at the time, and it's called the Great Oxygenation Event. And that is when cyanobacteria, the same ones that we're fighting in Lake Erie, the same bacteria that are causing the algal blooms.
Cyan means blue, right?
Right.
Like cyanotic.
Right, like someone
Or I think
can't
there's
breathe, they
cyan
turn
blue that painters use cyan blue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're blue-green algae, they're called. But, of course,
Right.
they're not algae. They're actually bacteria. And the cyanobacteria evolved. Now, the cyanobacteria are literally the only organisms that have ever produced photosynthesis with oxygen. And, you might say, well, but wait a bit, what about plants? They're not bacteria. What about corn and maple trees and things? Well, it turns out that what the multicellular organisms that can do photosynthesis today, what they've done is they've incorporated the cyanobacteria in their own cells, and they're called chloroplasts.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So if you look inside a living plant cell, like from a maple leaf, under a microscope, what you'll see is inside that cell there's all these little oval-shaped things dancing around in circles inside the cell, and those are the chloroplasts, and those chloroplasts are direct descendants from these cyanobacteria.
But if they got loose from the plant, they couldn't survive on their own anymore, right?
No, chloroplasts can't.
They've been domesticated.
Can't live by
Okay.
themselves, right? But
It's like letting out your pet ferret. Don't do it. The ferret will not survive.
Right. And but chloroplasts, but the cyanobacteria chloroplasts descended from are still very viable, as we know. And it appears that what they did a trick that gave them an advantage, because there were cyanobacteria before the Great Oxygenation Event. For a couple 100 million years, they were just another bacteria in this soup, which was covering the earth, blanketing the earth. But then cyanobacteria created a multicellular organism. It's probably the first time multicellular organisms were created. Everything else was just these loose bacteria. And so they actually were able to create plants of themselves that had long filaments, that had branches, that had specialized cells, and that gave them a huge advantage. And so they started to dominate, and that's when they started to produce oxygen like crazy. And that's the Great Oxygenation Event that killed off almost everything. But on the plus side, it also enabled multicellular organisms, because before that.
So you're saying they sort of brought us here and they can take us out. the cyanobacteria.
The bacteria, yes, that's my point.
They let us live to begin with, and they might do us in yet if the lake goes completely toxic. For all of them.
Well, the lake bacteria, those cyanobacteria, they're not going to kill us all off, because we've evolved in an ecosystem where they're a part of. So they've got natural checks and balances. They're not going to create a huge glob that's going to come out of the lake and envelop Toledo.
Only if you drink the water at the wrong time,
right.
And that could be bad.
Right. Yeah. So, but it shows you the power of bacteria. You don't mess with them, because they did at that point wipe out almost everything that was living.
They're kind of like the ninjas of the natural world. People think ninjas are all cool and everything, but they were assassins. They were not so cool, and they just wiped out half your castle in Japan, let me tell you.
Oh, okay.
You don't see the bacteria coming, is my point.
That's true, right. They're invisible, they're under the surface, and then all of a sudden, bam, there they are.
And no one knows why.
And so the cyanobacteria that created the Great Oxygenation Event, also enabled multicellular animals like us to develop, because without oxygen, we can't power these fantastically energy-consuming bodies. The anaerobic earth, those organisms all got forced down into lake bottoms and sediments, and there's actually a fair number of them living inside the earth.
So they're like the ancient survivors from before the cyanobacteria took over, basically.
Right, from the Great Oxygenation Event. And so that all happened because one cyanobacteria figured out how to do photosynthesis and eat carbon dioxide and produce oxygen. And then later on, another group of cyanobacteria figured out how to become a multicellular organism.
And it caught on very quickly, this whole making oxygen trend, apparently.
Right. But now I promised you a scary story. And we have a geneticist, a genetic engineer, who has created a new bacteria. Actually, she engineered a bacteria called Rhodopseudomonas palustris. And what that bacteria does, now that she's engineered it, do we have a caller? Okay. All right, well, we have a caller. All right, caller, we will put our story on hold for just a moment. And welcome to For a Green Future.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt your story, but
don't worry.
I had a question on recycling.
Oh, okay. Go right
Because
ahead.
I live here in Toledo. And I know that we pay for our trash pickup on our water bill. And is it true that if people aren't recycling properly and it gets contaminated with things that shouldn't be in the recycling, that it then gets all just dumped in the landfill anyway?
Well, I know that if things are too contaminated, they have to dump them. I mean, if stuff if nobody's cleaning out their cans or bottles or anything, and they get dangerous molds and things growing on them, there's no choice. The degree to which it's happening in Toledo with Toledo recycling, I don't know. I don't know that, but we could make that a topic for a future show. We could get the Toledo recycling people in there.
Also, you're going to get ants if you don't rinse out any of your bottles or cans, people, in your house.
Yeah. So
well,
yeah.
what I understand is that the city ends up having to pay, call it a fee or a fine or things like that for this that's going on. And if that's the case, and I'm sitting there paying to have my stuff recycled, and it's not in some cases, maybe we should start ticketing people for not following the rules.
That's an interesting idea.
My father actually got it. I don't know if they do it for that, but my father got in trouble because he had decided that if it didn't specifically say he couldn't put it in the recycling bin, he was allowed to.
Yeah, we had
that turned out to be not right, and they yelled at him or threatened to fine him or something. I don't know, but he reformed himself and changed his ways. So apparently, sometimes they enforce the rules.
Yeah, we had a guest on from the Wood County recycling program a few weeks ago, and she called that wish cycling. People just toss everything they think should be recycled into the bin, and of course it can't all be recycled that way. But I like that idea, that if somebody's putting contaminated recyclables in, it doesn't take that long to rinse it out, and it's something that you could do.
I'm not even talking about things like that.
What are you talking about?
I understand that grocery bags, for one thing, aren't recyclable in regards to what you can put out at the street.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, they cause a terrible problem in the recycling centers because they gum up the works and things. They stop the machinery that's recycling everything, and regularly recycling facilities have to actually shut down, take off all the shopping bags that have clogged everything up, and then start back up again. It's a big problem.
We had that lady on a couple weeks ago who said that if you can poke your finger through it, it can't go in the recycling bin. That's the rule with plastic. I remember that.
Yeah. So, but it doesn't.
People that'll put.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
People that'll put things in the bin just because maybe they don't have space in the other bin. Like yard waste or something like that.
Yeah. People, we do need to fix that. People do need to be a lot more careful about the recycling. I mean, ultimately, we want to get off plastic altogether, so this won't be a problem. But at this point, yeah, that's a big problem. But it doesn't. There's still a lot of recycling that goes on. I mean, it's a big problem. It slows the recycling down, but it's not like all the recycling is just going into the trash. So it's still worthwhile to keep doing.
I'd just love to hear an expert come and give me the truth on the topic, and that if it's costing the city money, for people that aren't doing it correctly, then let's fix it.
All right. Well, thanks for the call and thanks for the suggestion.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. That was a great call, 866-240-1065. All right. But now, back to the scary story.
Scary story.
Yes.
Cyanobacteria or something else. You're moving on.
Something else.
Right, something else. Okay.
Right. something called Rhodopseudomonas palustris. And the researchers over at the University of Washington, a gal named Caroline Harwood, re-engineered that bacteria so that it eats carbon dioxide like a regular photosynthetic organism, but instead of oxygen, it produces methane. And methane is a poisonous gas, odorless, colorless. And so the big thing, remember, photosynthesis has only happened once naturally that we know of in the whole 4.5 billion year history of life on Earth. Only happened that one time. And so what Caroline has done, just in her lab, tinkering around, is she went and made another photosynthetic organism. And the first time it happened, it changed the whole Earth ecology, wiped out almost everything, brought in a whole set of new critters. So I was worried about this organism. I'm thinking if this gets out, it could be producing methane left and right. If it gets it already, where it normally inhabits is the bottoms of lakes and streams and puddles and things like that. But it's an aquatic bacteria. So I'm thinking if it gets into the oceans, which are just chock full of carbon dioxide right now, maybe what we would have is an organism that would produce so much methane that it would basically wipe the rest of us out. So I actually wrote Caroline, and I promised I wouldn't be too scary about this stuff, but she wrote me a letter back saying, Mr. DeMar, thank you for your concern. Our organism does not have the potential to destroy life on Earth. And she says we're not going to release it into the environment, number one.
That's nice because things never get out of labs by mistake.
Oh, no, never. I mean, that's one of the fundamental rules of science is that nothing ever escapes from a lab.
So our thing is not dangerous thing on the part of scientists. It seems to really, the basic translation is, well, it couldn't be dangerous because we never make mistakes. We're scientists.
Right. And then number two, the genetic engineering they did weakened the organism so that it cannot survive outside the test tube. Well, and that's more reassuring because what they do is they modify the organism so that it has to keep getting some specific chemical that or it dies out on its own. The only problem with that is that I don't know if you've ever watched Jurassic Park movies, but that's basically the foundation.
Organisms modify themselves all the time, and that's a very small modification.
Yeah.
Or the thing about the Marburg virus, the hot zone? There was a book that came out in the 90s. There was viruses mutate. That's how we got Ebola.
Right.
That's how, we had something loose in a lab called Marburg virus. All it would have taken is a tiny genetic modification to make it airborne so they could spread through the air.
Right.
And it was really incredibly deadly. So that would have resulted in maybe most of the people in North America dying.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what they say is life finds a way. I mean,
right.
Now there is a proposal to make genetically modified organisms require 3 triggers. Instead of just having just figure out how to get around one chemical. You actually they can now insert genes that would require both to have specific molecules in there with them to keep growing and to avoid another molecule. So you make something that's widely in the environment toxic to your genetically modified bacteria, and you make your genetically modified bacteria dependent on you continuing to feed it specific chemicals. So that's much safer than just having one missing enzyme or something like that.
Right.
So, but that's not a law. That's not a right now. All that is a suggestion.
Oh dear.
And so, so what's happening all over the world is people are just, making these genetically modified organisms, and they don't have to follow any of these protocols. That none of them are laws.
But they can make them safe if they feel like it.
Yeah.
So that's good, I guess.
And to be fair to genetic engineers, most of them do.
I'm sure, yeah.
Because none of them want to cause that disaster that will then end their industry.
Yeah.
But she also goes on to say the type of bacteria we started with has not been found in the atmosphere. It lives in muddy ponds, which is fine, except that bacteria have their own way of getting around. I mean,
Yeah.
if it's found in muddy ponds, I'm sure it's found in muddy ponds all over North America.
And what you have, like estuaries, like places where it's effectively sort of a muddy mixed salt freshwater pond where fish get born, and lagoons, which are kind of muddy ponds, which are sometimes connected to the ocean and sometimes not, depending how the sand in the water is flowing.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and there's
what's
flooding.
Exactly to stop that from?
There's things, and people step in muddy ponds and walk around. And,
yeah.
So that's not a terribly reassuring one. And then her final reassuring point is that the amount of methane our engineered bacterium produces is tiny compared to the amount produced by naturally occurring methane-producing bacteria.
Well, so far, because they didn't get loose and really mess up everything yet.
Right. The difference is, of course, that her bacteria is a self-powering bacteria. It's photosynthetic.
Right.
So anywhere there's sunlight and water, it could conceivably get going and start producing methane, whereas all the other methane-producing organisms are dependent on their food stock.
Ah.
Yeah, so that's
right.
So that's the fundamental difference between what she did in the lab and what everyone else has done. And so that's kind of scary to me. And if you're thinking that, oh, Joe, that's not that scary, you're talking science fiction. I do have a real world example, which is just as scary, that actually happened. And I will get to that as soon as we're done with the bottom of the hour from hearing with our sponsors, because we have reached that point. It is the bottom of the hour, and we are very grateful to tell you about our sponsors. One of our sponsors is the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging program, and they teach people to love and respect nature, to restore wildlife habitats, and to lead outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects 20 parks and nature preserves around Wood County, which are open from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. And you can call the Wood County Parks at any time at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. Or you can go to their website, wcparks.org. Or, and this is cool and new, you can download their app. The app is at WC Parks. So just go to your app store, search for WC Parks, and they have a complete listing of all the events that are happening at the various parks. You can, if there's a park somewhere near you, you can click on this and say, oh, what's going on there? I did that this morning, and I discovered that there's a full moon walk tonight at the WW Knight Preserve over there in Perrysburg.
So, I saw the full moon last night. I guess it must have been just shy of full moon.
Right. Yeah, it's actually called the Hunter Moon because this is a time when hunters would typically go out. The leaves are down from the trees. It's cold. A lot of the plants have died. It's easy to see game. So they've got this full moon, and they would go hunting on.
And also, this is a good time to stock up for the winter because pretty soon it'll be cold and snowy, not so much fun to go hunting. And in the olden days, you had to have enough to last you all winter, or Grandma and the new baby were not going to make it.
Right. This is the time you start to worry about stuff like that. So
yes.
And then one other thing from Wood County Parks, they want us to tell you about this coming Tuesday, 5 to 7 p.m. at the Wood County Historical Center and Museum, which is at County Home Road in Bowling Green. They have a scarecrow making contest, and it's their 19th annual scarecrow making contest, and they're awarding prizes, $100 for first prize, second prize $50, third prize $25, and the winning scarecrow from kids under 16, they get just like the children's Peace Prize, there's a children's scarecrow prize, $25, and they will supply you with the sticks and the straw and the twine, and then you supply everything else, the clothing, the costume, and it sounds like a lot of fun. All right, our other sponsor for this hour is DeMar Consulting. DeMar Consulting is a computer consulting company. They will come to your home and help you with your computer problems. Maybe your monitor isn't working anymore, and it's time to get a new one. They'll help you do that. Maybe you have a computer that's running really slow. They'll figure out why it's running slow, and they'll help you fix it. DeMar Consulting, everyone at DeMar Consulting has a degree in computer science, so you know that they know what they're talking about, and they will help you basically with any sort of computer problem you have. If you want to get a new computer, they'll help you pick out a computer, and they won't oversell you. Like if all you do is email and check out Facebook, they're not going to try to sell you a computer that's 10 times more powerful, and has a super graphics card. On the other hand, if you are somebody who is a gamer and needs that kind of stuff, they'll help you do that because they know all about what goes in computers and so forth. So 2 ways to get a hold of them. One is 419-973-3000, and the other is to just go to their website, demarconsulting.com. DeMar spelled D-E-M-A-R-E, then the word consulting.com for all your home computing needs. All right, so there's our sponsor. So now to the real world scary story, and we have another bacteria that we need to tell you about. This one was called Klebsiella plantis, I believe is the last name. And this was a bacteria that was engineered to do something that seems on the surface like a wonderful thing. This was an engineered bacteria that would take cellulose material and break it down directly into alcohol. And so the idea was you don't need these big bioreactors that they do now for biofuels and stuff. You would just be able to take your waste from your fields, put it in a tub, spray it with this bacteria, keep it moist, and then in about 2 weeks you'd have a tub full of alcohol. And, okay, I see from the expression on Rebecca's face that she can already see where this is going.
Unless you spray or spill it on the wrong thing.
Right. And so what they did was they said, okay, well, let's see how this interacts with the real world here. And so they did, to give them credit, they did this first thing in the lab, and they just had some plants, and they sprayed some of this bacteria onto the plants, and they had a control group, and they had one with the regular bacteria, one with the engineered bacteria, and one without bacteria, with just water. And of course, what happened is the ones with the regular bacteria actually thrived, because in nature, this bacterium, which is one of the most widespread bacterium in the world, actually it's everywhere, puts nitrogen into the soil. And so it was good for the plants. They grew better. The one without any bacteria sprayed on it was kind of in the middle. But the one with the engineered bacteria, everything died. Every single plant died.
Uh-oh.
And they thought to themselves, this happens in labs all the time, but we must have done something wrong. These plants, we must have not watered them or had the temperature too high or something. And so they tossed them out in the back of the lab. And then they tried it again. And once again, everything died. And they didn't just die. They got decomposed. They turned all the plants, every plant, it didn't matter what kind of plant it was. They had tree species started in there. They had, vines. They had everything. They all turned to slime.
Just like what happens when you don't use your spinach within 24 hours of bringing it home.
That's right. Those little tubs of greens.
Yeah. That's
what was happening. They were every single plant turned into one of those little tubs of greens, and they realized, our engineered bacteria is eating all the cellulose in the soil and producing alcohol, which is then killing all the plants.
Ooh.
And they were like, oh my God, because they had already tossed that first batch of dead plants out in the back.
Oh, that's a scary story, Joe.
Yeah, it is a scary story. So they had to not only sterilize everything in the lab, they literally had to go and dig up all the soil around the lab and sterilize all of that. And had
Holy
they not done that, that bacterium would have spread over the entire continent of North America, probably gotten carried over to Europe and Asia too, and literally we would not have any terrestrial plants. Yeah.
There's a meme out on Facebook now that says I never understood when I was a child that all the monsters in the world would turn out to be human. The thing is that all the monsters, some of the worst monsters are not the ones who have ill will or terrible character defects, which are unusually beyond the norm. A lot of the worst monsters in the world are just sort of a well-intentioned person going, I think I'm going to try it.
Yeah, let's just do this.
Yeah.
Let's do it. See
let's
what happens.
Let's not overthink the consequences.
Right. And so, but we did by the skin of our bacteria-covered teeth, and that's another episode, by the way. The human mouth has more bacteria than literally any other environment. But
yeah, I was hearing on television some expose about they found fecal matter or some unexpected I'm just convinced that there's just everything is covered with fecal matter now. I've heard this about so many things.
Well, I'm sorry, but in this case, we dodged that bullet.
Yeah, it's good.
Those genetic engineers did not succeed in destroying all life on Earth.
Leave us with our nice, safe fecal matter.
So that's it. That's the scary Halloween story. So maybe for Halloween this year, maybe you could dress up as like a geneticist.
That's an idea.
Just put a lab coat on and have some test tubes.
There we are, yeah. I just need a white coat, pretty much.
Say, yeah, I have a test tube full of engineered Klebsiella here. So,
I've got a party to go to. That could work.
So, so that was it. That was our scary story. And next week we should have some nice, calming guests on.
There we go.
But I just wanted to push home the idea that this genetic engineering, Jill Stein in her 2016 campaign said we needed a moratorium on genetic engineering until we figured out what this, implications are for the natural world. And in the 90s, speaking of just going ahead and doing it, they did an experiment where they had a bacterium that they just put into the ground. They engineered it and put it to the ground just to see what would happen, like how much it would spread and how fast. It spread out at about 11 miles per year, but that meant it was growing exponentially because that circle from the point at which they put the one colony in the ground, that grew 11 miles. The radius grew 11 miles each year, and now that engineered bacteria is literally everywhere in North America.
So of all the life that finds a way, bacteria is their champion.
Right, yeah, from Canada down through Mexico into South America.
Bacteria really finds a way.
Right. So nothing sort of demonstrates that everything is connected thing better than bacteria, because you can.
There was a popular children's book by Lewis somebody, I think it was called Holes. Probably your kids have read it. It won a prize or something. It's in all the libraries. Mm-hmm. Same guy did a book called, I believe, Mud, about some kind of genetically engineered bacteria, which is in a mud puddle, and if you touch it, it sort of turns into eats your flesh and does very bad things to you. Yeah, it's a children's book, so I'm not sure anyone actually dies, but.
Yeah.
In real life, they probably would if that happened. I don't know how far-fetched is that. I'm hearing some things that would sound kind of similar to that, or equally frightening,
Well, just don't mess with the bacteria. That's the lesson there. They outnumber us by,
Yeah, they're very hard to control. You think you can do it, but maybe not.
All right. Well, time to move on, though. The scary story's over. It's a beautiful day. All the plant life in North America isn't dying at the moment, so we could move on to some other things. All right. First of all, HB6 update. And there always is an HB6 update. It's like something happens every single week on this topic.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, that reminds me, don't let me forget, we have arranged 2 HB6 petition signing events, and they're at private venues. So blockers, if you show up, we will call the police, and you will be taken away for trespassing. So just stay home. Don't even mess with it. One is this Monday from 5 to 7 p.m. at Grounds for Thought in Bowling Green. That's in Wood County. So just come. There'll be a table inside the restaurant or inside the coffee shop. Somebody there with a petition. You'll be able to just sign and leave. And please do. As you know, if you've been listening, HB6 is probably the worst energy policy ever put into law because it eliminates Ohio's energy efficiency program. It eliminates Ohio's alternative energy programs, and instead it puts a charge on our bills that will fund nuclear and coal power. So it's literally trying to take us back to the 1950s in terms of our energy policy. So one at Grounds for Thought, and the second one is going to be at the Attic on Adams, which is the bar above Manos' restaurant there. And that also will be 5 to 7 on Friday. So Monday or Friday, we will have a petitioner there with a petition that you can sign. And so if you haven't had a chance yet, if you haven't actually come across a petitioner yet and you want to do something about HB6, it's Grounds for Thought on Monday and the Attic on Adams on Friday.
I talked to some friends yesterday who I ran across who told me that they did eventually successfully sign it in front of the library, but the second they announced their intention to do so, like 5 people in front of the library rushed at them and were like, no, don't do it because blah, 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 blah. And I really hope they're paying all of those people.
Yeah,
they're paid blockers, because people hang out in front of the library don't have much, you know.
They are.
I hope they didn't just propagandize a whole bunch of people and they're not even getting paid for that. That's sad.
Well, speaking of pay, this is what the update is. The pro HB6 forces are actually offering petitioners cash money to quit. They say if you stop gathering petitions, we will write you a check. Here's $2,500. Here's $3,000.
Wow.
They're giving them money if they're offering to buy, according to reports, they're offering to buy signed petitions off of the petitioners. We'll give you $5,000 for that batch of petitions you just got signed.
Oh my God. They are really terrified of this thing.
They are, because they know that if it comes to a vote, if this is an issue on the ballot, and people talk about it, and they see the list of what it does and what it doesn't do, they're going to lose by like a 95% margin, because nobody is going to want to.
Because it taxes a huge amount of money onto your electric bill.
Right, for nukes and coal.
Yeah.
So, and the other update is that the people who are doing the petitions, the company Ohioans Against Corporate Bailouts, are trying to overturn HB6, have filed a lawsuit saying that the Secretary of State, by intentionally taking the maximum amount of time it was allowed to validate the initial petitions, because when you do a referendum, you first have to do an initial petition with a couple thousand signatures.
Okay.
And once that's approved, then you get to go on and do the full referendum, which needs 265,000 signatures.
Mm-hmm.
So the Secretary of State took the maximum amount of time for both of the initial signatures, which used up 40 of the 90 days that the petitioners had to get their 250,000 signatures. So the Secretary of State essentially had a pocket veto by just holding on to these petitions, these initial applications,
right,
for 40 out of the 50 days. So they've filed a lawsuit in state court, and they're hoping to get an extension. So this story may even continue beyond the October 20th deadline.
Yeah.
We'll see. All right. So that's our HB6 update. And now it's time for a nice thing, our letter from the future.
Yay.
Yes.
There's going to be a future.
Exactly, because they're sending us letters.
Right.
Right. Every week, my great-great-granddaughter sends a letter from the year 2299. Here's this week's letter. Dear GGG, that's her nickname for me. The drilling is still on hold here in the year 2299. The engineers haven't yet figured out a way to keep the hot, shifting rock deep below the surface from twisting the drill upwards as it tries to drill downwards. So I keep studying my deep underground bacteria. They're amazing. They eat sulfur and hydrogen, and they produce methane. The bacteria community in the Earth's crust is actually the largest ecosystem on Earth, and most of the people in your time don't even know it exists. One thing about those bacteria is that they grow very slowly. They can take thousands of years to divide. That means that the bacteria I'm looking at in the year 2299 were all alive back in your time. Somehow that makes me feel closer to you, great-great-grandpa. Keep up the good work. Love, Marie I.
Aw.
So there we are. All right. Well, we have 8:52, and there's definitely time for us to take a call at 866-240-1065. And we'd love to hear your calls. And we have an update on we had a statement 2 weeks ago that a caller last week corrected us on, and we have an update on that. And that is there's a native girl named Autumn Peltier who was nominated for the Children's Peace Prize, which is a sort of a parallel prize to the full Nobel Peace Prize. And that prize has been awarded. And Rebecca, I think you have the names of the actual winners of that prize.
Right. It was split between Greta Thunberg and someone named Davina Maloum, I believe, Maloum, from Cameroon. Greta Thunberg, as we know, organized the climate strike. She's working on climate change. Davina apparently has organized children in Cameroon against terrorism and being forced into being child soldiers and things. Just, going around and telling them, hey, look, this is a violation of your rights, which how would you know that if you were a small child and the person told you, I have a right to do this,
Mm-hmm. Right.
She has a whole organization encouraging children to be peacemakers, and they've, made a statement against what's happening to them.
Yeah.
Which is great. I know that there were a lot of people that various people were rooting for, and I'm sure many of them deserve the prize every bit as much, maybe even more. I wouldn't know. I didn't do the math there. But wow, what a great problem to have, where we have all these teenage activists that we can be on teams for them.
Right.
That's fabulous.
It is, and it's really good that that so many people were nominated. I think there were like 100 people nominated roughly. But now that Greta Thunberg has won the Children's Nobel, quote unquote, I don't know if I know she's also nominated for the main Nobel Peace Prize. And I don't know. She won the one. I don't know. Is winning the other one overkill, or is it better if she wins both? Because that points to the problem more. Because the climate change issue, I mean, a lot of these problems all over the world are at the root of them are things like climate change. Because, well, like for example, in a lot of the African countries and a lot of countries all over the world, the hunt for fossil fuels creates the political situation that then causes societies to collapse and militias to form and causes the kind of unrest and wars and conflicts that lead to the situations that lead to children soldiers being inducted and so forth. So a healthy climate, a healthy planet will support us. It will give us everything we need. But once you start attacking the climate, once you start destroying the very thing that's supporting you and your economy and your family, then things start to break down and people have to pick up guns and people create refugees and, all these problems happen. So
also, I read, at least on Facebook, I don't know if it's true or not. I mean, it's complicated math, but I read that war is actually the most environmentally destructive things that humans do. Way worse than plastic straws, apparently.
Well, that is arguably true. I mean, if you factor in the preparations for war,
right?
Because, like for example, some of the worst contaminated places on Earth are former nuclear weapons or chemical weapons or, regular weapons manufacturing places. So there's a lot of places there. One of the things that we do now with war, the U.S. is doing this in some places, and it's actually a war crime. The U.S. frankly should be standing trial, as we're using depleted uranium munitions, which is essentially nuclear wastes turned into bullets and shells, and that's happening. They used a lot of those in Fallujah, and now Fallujah has a birth defect rate, which is more than 10 times anywhere else in Iraq.
So it's a massive assault against civilians for generations to come. It's basically salting the earth,
and it's
which is relatively harmless compared to uranium.
Right. Well, in the case of these uraniums, the form of uranium they're using stays toxic for, I think it's 2.4 billion years.
No.
So Fallujah, that area will never recover. And the problem with a kind of pollutant that attacks genetics, that causes the birth defects, is that the defects, once they're put into the population, literally can stay with the population forever. If they're not selected out, then people will always be born without limbs.
But tell me again how we went into there to help people.
Well, there was a guy. We took him out.
Yeah.
He's gone. He's been gone for a long time now. But unfortunately, the depleted uranium stays forever. And I believe they're going to have to abandon Fallujah. I think that whole city.
It ain't a good place to live anymore.
Right. So, all right. Well, I hear our comforting, nice theme music. And I'm sorry I scared you all today. But at least it's a nice, beautiful, sunny day. Get out and enjoy nature. Go to a park, go to the river, go see something beautiful and living, because if you don't appreciate it, if you don't cherish it, then you're more likely to go along with things that threaten it. So
just wear your sunblock and bug spray.
Well, I don't think there's any bugs out. It's got cold enough that bugs are gone.
I hope so.
All right. Well, this is Joe DeMar
and Rebecca Wood
signing off.